A new Speedmaster, a literal Seiko Panda, the world's fastest beating calendar, and Longines brings back one of their best. It's episode 73 of A Week in Watches, a semi-weekly look back at news, stories, releases, and more from the watch industry. I'm Zach Weiss, co-founder of Warner Wound, and I will be your host today. 2024 is off to a good start with some exciting releases all around. LVMH just had their pre-Watches and Wonders release week, a sort of taste of things to come, and other brands will be following suit shortly. And you heard it here first, Warner Wound's first limited edition of 2024 is coming out next week on February 7th in collaboration with the excellent Formex. We're very excited about it. This week's episode is brought to you by the Wind Up Watch Shop. New this month in the shop are the exceptionally cool Seiko Alpinist GMTs in black and blue. A fantastic evolution to the iconic Outdoors Alpinist line. This is the first time they've been offered with a mechanical GMT. Check those out and more at windupwatchshop.com. Okay, you know the drill. Like and subscribe. Thanks in advance. Let's get on to the show. Did you know the Speedmaster is the watch that went to the moon? Well, if you happen to not know that absolutely quintessential bit of watch moon human history lore, Omega has once again announced it to the world in the form of a very moony moonwatch. As was expected, Omega utilized one cold Tuesday in January to launch a new Speedmaster. But this year's wasn't really so new, so much as just an upgrade to an existing model. The Speedmaster Dark Side of the Moon Apollo 8 was first launched in 2018 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the eponymous mission, which was the first space flight to reach the moon. But unlike others in that range, featured a classic manual wound variant of the 1861 movement instead of an automatic movement, harkening to the Speedmaster professionals worn by the crew. What made the watch particularly special, however, was that the movement plates had been etched with a realistic depiction of the moon surface on both dial and back side of the caliber, as well as blackened for a cool effect. The normal dial was skeletonized to show these plates while also creating a sense of depth, and yellow was used for contrast. It was a very cool looking watch that celebrated the Speedmaster's history in an enjoyable and novel way. Well, for 2024, Omega decided to revisit this watch, giving it a rejuvenation both inside and out, and adding a very cool new detail. Starting from the inside, they utilized a new version of the 3861 caliber, adding a coaxial Skaven and master chronometer certification in the mix, called the 3869. The new reference number speaks to the elaborate decoration. Like before, the plates have been darkened and etched using laser ablation, but to a far more detailed level, which also appears to have some amount of color contrast between valleys and peaks for even greater sense of depth. The dial surface remains largely unchanged, save one small detail. Well, a small but big detail. The active seconds hand is now a micro model of a Saturn V rocket. And by model, I mean three-dimensional, not a flat stamped hand. It's even painted white and black and features USA between these stabilizing fins. Made out of grade 5 titanium by using laser turning, which I imagine is some kind of laser lathe, it was apparently a bit of a challenge to make, resulting in a pending patent. The overall result is quite striking if you're into wearing lunar surfaces. The Omega Speedmaster Dark Side of the Moon Apollo 8 2024 edition is priced at $14,500, which is quite a bit more than a standard Speedy, but quite a lot less than a trip to the moon. Seiko made watches for almost no one. The Seiko Power Design Project is a fun challenge that the company issues to its design team to encourage out-of-the-box thinking based on a single theme. Now, that doesn't mean just an interesting dial color or some novel strap material, though both might end up part of a project, but rather something unexpected and conceptual. For the Power Design Project 2024, the theme was incredibly specialized watches, which is to say watches created for very specific tasks. As they say on the rather cute presentation site for the project, watches that 99% of people don't need, which is a much more fun way to think about it. What resulted were 7 designs, each by a different designer working at Seiko, that range from peculiar to highly whimsical. Titled Hide and Seek, Pattern Maker, Sukiyaki, Panda Lovers, Masking Tape Enthusiasts, Sunny Men, and Ambidextrous, each tackled some task, occupation, hobby, or just general interest via a watch design, which is to say the watches either support activities or reflect interests. Perhaps the simplest to explain is the Panda Lovers watch designed by Kiyotaka Sakai, who currently works within Grand Seiko. The watch is a panda chronograph that looks like an actual panda. Inspired by his son's literal reaction to calling a watch a panda, to which his son said, "No, it's a watch," Sakai set out to create a watch that panda lovers would enjoy. So some notable touches are the elongated black patches around the subdials, more accurately reflecting the coloration of a panda, the fur texture surface, which does feel very Grand Seiko, and the ear-shaped pushers set in bullhead position. I have to say, if this was put into production for both kids and adults, I think it would do very well. One concept that reinterprets the very function of a watch is the hide and seek by Masanori Kawamura, who works on Prospect watches. His watch is a functional concept meant to be used by those who are it in the game of hide and seek, or ogre as they refer to it, which I had never heard but actually quite like. The watch, which looks more like an Android or perhaps a high-tech pepper grinder, features a layered flip-open design. When open, a stopwatch is visible underneath a magnifying glass. The idea is that the watch turns into a set of goggles of sort, blinding one eye, focusing on a timer with the other. This is for use at the start of the game when the it has to let the other players hide without peeking. When closed, a score counting knob is usable, allowing the it to track how many people they have found. Toy-like and nostalgic, this is a fun, clever, and irreverent take on what a wrist-mounted timekeeping device can be used for. There are 5 others, including one that is a pin cushion for tailors, another that acts as a holder of masking tape, and one that is a modern take on the original time-telling device, the sundial. If you happen to be traveling through Japan between now and March 1st, you can check out these designs in an exhibit at Seiko Seed in Tokyo. Zenith combines complications for a high-frequency hit. Zenith's renewed success over the last several years has stemmed from accurately reviving their iconic chronograph designs from the mid-20th century, while also continuing to improve and innovate on their famous movement platform, the El Primero. A great example of this is from a couple of years ago when they relaunched the Chronomaster original line, which paid close tribute to the A38-6 model from 1969, one of the first automatic chronographs. But they did so with a cool twist. Despite being visually very accurate, they opted to utilize a new variant of the El Primero caliber featuring a central 1/10 second counter, which makes one rotation around the dial in 10 seconds versus the normal 60. In doing so, they put modern innovation into a gorgeous historical package. Kind of a perfect example of what to do with a heritage watch in the 2020s. For 2024, they've announced the next chapter in the El Primero Chronomaster original story, which adds in calendar functionality for not just another cool take on this iconic watch, but also quite a rare combination of complications. Dubbed the Chronomaster Original Triple Calendar, the high-frequency chrono now has month and day windows at 2 and 10 respectively, a moon phase within the 60-minute counter at 6, and their classic if contentious date window at 4:30, all within the same elegant 38mm case from the original model. To achieve this, they shrunk the subdials to normal size rather than their signature overlapping design, which I imagine is something a lot of people would prefer regardless. The result is a very balanced and still highly legible triple calendar chronograph, which are fairly rare in general. You occasionally see watches with Valjoux 7751s in them, such as the Speedmaster 3520 that I have, but new watches with that movement almost never come out. And then you have something like the JLC triple calendar chrono from a few years ago, which is lovely, but a touch larger at 40mm and more expensive too. But Zenith is the only brand with a high-frequency triple calendar chronograph, and this is almost definitely the first ever with a 1/10 central counter. The Chronomaster original triple calendar launched in 3 also quite excellent colorways. A panda with gold trim, an inverse panda with more of a gray toned dial and also gold trim, and one in a gorgeous shade of grassy olive green, also with gold trim. Honestly, I'd be hard-pressed to pick from these. Priced at $13,400 on leather or $13,900 on a bracelet, these seem well priced for what you are getting, if obviously an expensive watch. Like I said, it's the only watch with this exact complication. It's a great size, and it looks great too. A very good start to 2024 for Zenith. Longines powers up. Longines heritage-inspired launches tend to be some of the more enjoyable from a large Swiss brand. They pull from a huge catalog and often surprise with what they choose. The high-frequency Ultrachron Diver being one that still stands out to me. To kick off 2024, Longines surprised again with the recreation of one of their most beloved and genuinely gorgeous vintage models, the Conquest Central Power Reserve. First launched in 1959, this model's defining feature, obviously, was a power reserve at the center of the dial. But this wasn't then and isn't now quite like any other power reserve indicator. Rather than a hand traveling along a fixed arc representing empty to full, the power reserve consists of discs that are flush with the dial, thus appearing, at a glance, like printed graphics. At the very center of the dial is a disc with a straight line bisecting it, getting wider towards one side. This design always reminds me of the logo for the Bauhaus school created by Oskar Schlemmer, which was then adopted by the excellent 70s post-punk pre-goth band of the same name. One of my favorites, if you couldn't tell. Back to the watch. Encircling this disc is then a ring with an index of numerals representing the amount of potential hours of reserve. Now here's where things get really interesting. When winding the watch, the disc rotates to align with the wider part of the inner disc. But as it unwinds, the inner disc rotates. As such, the center of the dial is essentially always in a state of flux. As this is not a standard feature, for the new model, Longines unveiled the L8 96.5 caliber with a 72-hour power reserve, frequency of 25,200 beats per hour, and silicon components, including the balance spring for magnetic resistance they are touting as 10 times greater than the ISO 764 standard. Regardless, it's a thoroughly modern movement despite its vintage intentions. While the power reserve is the star of the show, there's actually a lot more to this watch, both vintage and modern, that make it unique and attractive. The most obvious being the date at 12. It doesn't need to be there. There's nothing at 3 or 6 to prevent it from going in one of those more expected locations, but I love that it's at 12. It maintains balance but bucks convention, giving the watch a more intriguing personality. The rest of the dial then consists of multifaceted batons on a domed surface that span across a trench that bisects the dial, creating an appealing dividing line. A unique skyscraper silhouette hand shape rounds out the unexpected but still classic design. In case you can't tell, I'm really a fan of this one. There was some clever ingenuity in this design that 65 years later still looks fresh. The new model does have some changes as well, such as being upsized to a still appealing 38mm from 35mm, and coming in 3 colors: champagne with gold markers, which most closely resembles the original, anthracite with rose gold tone markers for a bit more decadence, and a clean black with silver applied markers, which might be the most conservative but still looks damn sharp. Coming in at $3,800, the Longines Conquest Central Power Reserve appears to be available to purchase now and already shipping. And that's a wrap for episode 73 of A Week in Watches. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more, hopefully exciting news from the world of watches. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to check out wornandwound.com daily for more great watch content. I'll see you next time.